The solo wasn't finished. But someone spoke. And Ace Frehley's fingers froze on the strings. The studio was quiet in the way recording studios get quiet when something matters. Not silent. You could hear the hum of amplifiers, the soft hiss of tape running through the machine, the barely audible breath of the engineer behind the glass. But quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you aware of your own heartbeat. Ace Frehley sat on a wooden stool in Studio C. His Les Paul rested across his lap, familiar weight, familiar balance. The red recording light glowed above the door. The engineer had said, "Rolling," 3 minutes ago. Since then, there had been only the guitar. He wasn't playing for the track anymore. The song had ended 2 minutes earlier, drums faded, bass line completed, rhythm guitar laid down clean. But Ace had kept going. A solo that wasn't on the arrangement sheet. Notes that weren't in the producer's plan. Just Ace and the guitar, finding something in the space between what was written and what needed to exist. His eyes were closed. His fingers moved across the fretboard with the precision of muscle memory built over 20 years. The solo was building towards something, a resolution that lived somewhere in the next 8 bars, a phrase that would complete the thought his hands had started. And then the voice came from the control room. "That's not what we discussed." 4 words. Spoken flatly. Not shouted. Not aggressive. Just stated. A producer's voice cutting through the talkback speaker mounted above Ace's head. Ace's fingers stopped. Not gradually. Not a fade or a slow release. They simply stopped, mid-phrase, the last note hanging in the air unresolved, decaying slowly through the amplifier's natural reverb until the room returned to that humming silence. His eyes opened. He didn't look toward the control room window. Didn't move his head. Just sat there, guitar across his lap, hands frozen in the exact position they'd been in when the voice interrupted. Ace didn't defend himself. He never did. The control room was small. 6 people crammed into a space designed for 4. The producer sat at the mixing console, his hands still on the talkback button. 2 label executives stood behind him, arms crossed, expressions carefully neutral. The engineer occupied his usual position, hands resting on faders, trying to be invisible. A session coordinator sat in the corner with a clipboard. And standing by the door, smoking despite the "No smoking" sign, was Mickey Heller, session guitarist, hired gun, the kind of musician who played on 3 albums a week and never got his name on any of them. Mickey had been in the control room for the last hour, ostensibly there to consult on the guitar arrangements. Really, he was there because the producer didn't trust Ace Frehley to deliver what the song needed without embellishment. Without the Space Ace theatrics. Without turning a simple rock track into something that demanded attention. The producer released the talkback button. Looked at the 2-inch tape still rolling. Looked at Mickey. "You were right. He can't help himself." Mickey took a drag from his cigarette. "Told you. Give him a guitar and he forgets what song he's playing. It's always the Ace show." One of the label executives leaned forward. "Can we use any of that?" The engineer shook his head slowly. "It's technically clean. But it's not what we charted." He added 3 sections that aren't in the arrangement. Changed the key in the middle. Went 12 bars over. "Because he doesn't listen," the producer said, his voice carrying that particular exhaustion of someone who'd been trying to wrangle a session for 8 hours. "We gave him specific parameters. Simple solo. 8 bars. Stay in the pocket. Support the vocal melody. Instead, he gestured at the studio window where Ace still sat motionless. He does whatever that was." Mickey crushed his cigarette in an empty coffee cup. "Want me to lay down the part? I can have it done in 2 takes. Exactly what you want. No drama." The producer considered this. His finger hovered over the talkback button again. In the studio, Ace hadn't moved. The guitar was still across his lap. His hands were still in that frozen position, fingers pressed against strings that were no longer vibrating. His face showed nothing. Not anger. Not embarrassment. Just a kind of quiet waiting. He'd been here before. Different studios. Different producers. Different session musicians brought in to fix what Ace apparently couldn't deliver. Always the same pattern. Always the same assumption that the guy in makeup who jumped around on stage couldn't possibly understand restraint. Couldn't possibly serve a song instead of serving himself. Ace never argued. Never defended the choices. Never explained that every note he played came from some instinct deeper than charts or producer notes, or label executive expectations. He just sat. And waited. And let them make their decision. The producer pressed the talkback button. Ace, let's try that again. But this time, stick to the chart. 8 bars. Simple melody. Don't overthink it. Through the control room glass, they watched Ace nod once. Slowly. He adjusted his position on the stool. Brought his hands back to ready position. Waited for the count-in. The engineer looked uncomfortable. You want me to roll over that last take? Yeah, the producer said. We're not using it. Mickey Heller smiled slightly. One of the label executives checked his watch. The session coordinator made a note on her clipboard. The engineer rewound the tape. Set the punch-in point. Hit record. Ace, from the top of the solo section. Here we go. 3, 2. Subscribe and leave a comment, because some moments only make sense when we remember them together. Ace played the solo the way they asked. 8 bars. Simple melody line. Stayed in the pocket. Supported the vocal melody that wasn't even there yet. Hit every mark on the chart. Clean. Professional. Exactly what a session player would deliver. It was technically perfect. Musically competent. Completely forgettable. When he finished, Ace set the guitar on the stand beside his stool and looked toward the control room window. Waited. The producer listened to the playback. Nodded. That's usable. Good. Let's move on to... Wait. The voice came from the corner. The session coordinator, speaking for the first time all day. She was young, maybe 25, hired 3 weeks ago, still learning the studio protocols, still figuring out when to speak and when to stay quiet. Everyone looked at her. Sorry, she said quickly. Can we hear the first take again? The one he did before? The producer's expression suggested this was a waste of time. It's 12 bars over. It doesn't fit the arrangement. I know, I wrote something down and I want to check it. The engineer glanced at the producer, who shrugged. Fine. 30 seconds. The engineer queued up the original take. The one Ace had played before the interruption. The one that went too long, changed keys, ignored the chart. It came through the studio monitors. Different from the second take in every measurable way. Longer. More complex. Harmonically adventurous. The kind of solo that announced itself instead of sitting politely in the background. But something else too. Something the session coordinator had heard and no one else had noticed. A theme buried in those extra bars. A melodic phrase that appeared 3 times across the solo, each iteration slightly different, building toward a resolution that... Stop it there, she said suddenly. Right there. That phrase. The one he plays at 1:18. The engineer stopped the tape. Play the vocal melody from the second verse, she said. The part that goes sometimes the night remembers. The engineer looked confused but queued it up. The rough vocal track played. The singer's guide melody, recorded 2 days earlier, not even final yet. The melodic phrase matched. Not exactly. But close enough that anyone listening could hear the connection. Ace's solo was quoting the vocal melody, but a version of it that didn't exist yet. He'd taken the basic melody line and inverted it, expanded it, turned it into something that sounded like a guitar answering a question the vocals were still asking. The session coordinator looked at the producer. He's playing a conversation with the vocal. That's why it's longer. He's not ignoring the song. He's inside it. The control room went quiet. Mickey Heller stopped reaching for another cigarette. One of the label executives leaned closer to the monitors. The engineer rewound the solo again, listening more carefully this time. The producer sat back in his chair. Listened to the whole thing. 12 bars over. Changed key. Added sections that weren't charted. And completely, undeniably perfect. Shit, the producer said quietly. Away from the spotlight, Ace made a choice no one expected. Through the control room window, they could see Ace still sitting on the stool. He picked up the guitar again, not playing, just holding it, fingers absently finding positions on the fretboard, the way guitarists do when they're thinking. The producer pressed the talkback button. Ace, come into the control room for a minute. Ace set the guitar down. Stood slowly. Walked through the studio door, down the short hallway, pushed open the control room door. 6 people turned to look at him. He stood there. Waiting. His face showed nothing. Not expectation. Not defensiveness. Just that same quiet patience. The producer gestured to the empty chair beside the mixing console. Sit. I want you to hear something. Ace sat. The engineer played the original take again. All of it. The full 12 bars over. The key change. The sections that weren't charted. The melodic conversation between guitar and a vocal that hadn't been properly recorded yet. When it finished, the producer turned to face Ace. Why didn't you tell us what you were doing? Ace looked at him for a moment. Then shrugged. One shoulder. Barely perceptible. You would have stopped me anyway, he said quietly. His voice carried no bitterness. Just statement of fact. The chart says 8 bars. The chart's wrong. The producer's jaw tightened. You can't just... I'm not arguing. Ace interrupted, his voice still quiet, still level. You asked why I didn't explain? I'm telling you. The chart serves the arrangement. The arrangement serves the song. The song needs this solo. So that's what I played. He looked at the console, at the tape reels still turning. You want 8 bars that sit in the pocket, and don't make trouble, you've got that on take 2. It's usable. You can release it. Nobody'll complain. He stood up, like the conversation was over. But, the producer said. Ace stopped. Turned back. But in 5 years, nobody'll remember it either. They'll remember the take you just erased. Mickey Heller had been quiet through all of this. Now he spoke. You think pretty highly of yourself. Ace looked at him. Not with anger. Not with challenge. Just acknowledgement that Mickey had spoken. No, Ace said simply. I think highly of the song. And I know what it needs. He walked back toward the studio. Stopped at the door. Didn't turn around. You brought me here to play guitar, he said. That's what I did. You want something else, you've got plenty of guys who can give it to you. He glanced back briefly. But they won't give you this. The control room door closed behind him. The 6 people sat in silence. Finally, one of the label executives spoke. Use the first take. The producer started to protest. It's 12 bars. I don't care. Use it. Extend the arrangement if you have to. That's the solo. The other executive nodded. He's right. In 5 years, that's what people will remember. Mickey Heller had nothing to say. What followed silenced everyone in the room. They used the first take. Extended the arrangement to accommodate the extra bars. Built the final mix around Ace's solo instead of forcing the solo to fit the mix. The song was released 6 weeks later. It became the only track from that album anyone remembers. 20 years later, the session coordinator, now a successful producer herself, was asked in an interview about the moment that taught her how to listen. She told the story of Ace Frehley sitting silent, while everyone dismissed what he'd played. How he never defended it. Never explained it. Just waited. He knew, she said. He always knew. He just didn't need us to understand in that moment. The song would do the explaining for him. Share and subscribe, Some stories deserve to be remembered. Mickey Heller played on 300 albums. His name appears on none of them. Ace Frehley's solo from that session is still taught in music schools as an example of serving the song while transforming it. The wooden stool Ace sat on that day stayed in Studio C for another decade. Session musicians would request it specifically. They called it the listening chair, because that's what Ace had done. While everyone talked, he listened to the song. And he played what it needed, not what they wanted. The guitar remembered. Even when they didn't.